Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, working at simplifying things in our lives one day at a time, one simple step at a time. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and happy Memorial Day. If you're listening to this the day that it is released, it is Memorial Day, and I hope you have some fun plans. I hesitated what adjective I wanted to use because for me, the best plans are really chill. And the word fun sometimes connotates just a little too much excitement for me sometimes. Does that make sense? It's the best holidays, I think, are those ones that you just kick back, you completely relax, you do things that you would feel guilty about doing on a regular day, just soaking in the sun, swimming, floating around, reading a good book. I don't know why I'm talking about all these summer things because as I record this, I am sitting here in a long sleeve shirt, a long sleeve sweater, and I have a blanket over my lap, and I am still cold. And it is days before Memorial Day. I don't know what's going on in New England this year. It is colder than usual. We did have a couple days of wonderful sun and really nice, like almost too hot weather. And then it turned crazy cold and rainy. And I couldn't even get all my plants hardened off well because it's just been nonstop rainy and cloudy. I had all these plants that were almost done hardening off and they still aren't done to get them planted in the garden because there hasn't been sun to do that. So I did go ahead and plant in the mud today, and I got a lot of things in that had probably maybe 7, 8, maybe 9 days of hardening off. So they'll all be good. They'll be good enough. I like to do a little longer than that. If you don't know what hardening off is, I mean, I was going to explain it, but you know what? It really doesn't matter because that's not what this episode is about. So I'll just move on. But what this episode is about is just a really simple topic that I don't know, I think we kind of take it for granted and we just think it's so easy and we just kind of miss a few steps to make it so much better. We're going to talk about grilling our meat, not just today on Memorial Day, but all summer long. It's just such a good way to have a great high protein meal that the family loves. But if you're missing a few little details about grilling correctly, the meat might not be that great and your taste might not be that great. And maybe you don't even know the steak could be better. I went through years, probably decades, just not really knowing that my steak could be so much better coming off the grill if I just knew a couple things. Now, this isn't reserved just for steak. It's great for pork and chicken. We'll talk about that. But basically, I have 4 grilling tips for you that are going to hopefully up level your meals all summer long. And maybe you're catching this in time that I can even help up level your Memorial Day weekend. So, first tip is to choose the right cut. All beef is not the same for grilling. When I got my first box of meat in the mail this winter, I specifically chose cuts that I knew would grill well. And we had it delivered to my in law's house. And it was actually super fun. I'm like, okay, to my father in law, get the grill out. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, you don't understand. This is the best of the best meat. And I want to do it just right. So pull that grill out. Let's do this. And again, he just kind of looked at me like, you could just put it in the oven. I'm like, no, I want to make you an amazing meal. So I finally convinced him after a few minutes. It was worth it for his daughter-in-law to go ahead and pull out his grill out of his shed. So anyway, my awesome father-in-law did that. And we stood around, my husband and I and my dad, my father-in-law, and we put 3 different kinds of steaks on the grill. My goal was I wanted us, and then my sister-in-law and her husband came over too, and I wanted us all to just, first of all, have an amazing meal. And second of all, just taste a little bit of all 3 different varieties of steak because I kind of wanted to do this experiment to see what's the best on the grill and which of these cuts do we like the best? Because I knew I'd be ordering lots more meat in the mail if it was as delicious as I thought. And I wanted to know what I wanted to make sure to get every month. So The experiment turned out wonderfully, by the way. And the 3 cuts that I used, these are not the only 3 cuts of beef that are good for grilling, but they're the ones I highly recommend. Highly. So take that for what it's worth. I'm definitely not, I don't know, a beef connoisseur or a grilling expert, but ribeye, New York strip, and filet mignon. Those, if you're watching on YouTube, I just put up my fingers to count and I noticed the dirt that is caked under my fingernails. I did wash my hands when I got back from the garden. If I didn't, they would look literally black. So I did wash them, but I did not scrub under my nails. Anyway, another side note. So ribeye is known to be rich and almost buttery flavored, and New York strip is a little bit, I was going to say less fatty. I guess the right word is leaner. It's a little leaner than a ribeye. So if I had to choose out of the 2 of them, I think I would choose ribeye because it does have some more marbling, but the New York strip is very tender. So that's why it's great for grilling. And a filet mignon, I mean, it's just the best cut all the way around. In fact, I'm getting a free one of those every time I order with my annual subscription with the meat that I'm getting in the mail because they had this awesome deal. And it's crazy because you could choose. What do they have? I forget how many pounds of ground meat. It might be 2 pounds, or I forget how many. I think it's chicken breast. I forget how many of them, or a filet mignon. And I'm like, why? There's no comparison there. I mean, a filet mignon, it's like the top of the top. Maybe I know my mom spoiled me when it comes to meat growing up. I didn't realize as a teen that most teens didn't eat the way we did, but my parents were very into their steaks. And my mom loved broiling her filet mignon with bacon wrapped around it. So that's usually the way we had it. And my brother was 8 years older. So it was, for as long as I can remember, pretty much just me in the house, almost an only child. So with not a lot of kids to feed, they could just buy these amazing cuts of meat and the 3 of us share it. And uh, just thinking back to mom's meals, so good. But I grew up on filet mignon and I'm very spoiled. I will tell you, it's the best. It's also the most expensive. So that's why, you have to spread it around and spread it out. But anyway, those 3 cuts, it was hard for us all to choose our favorite. We all did agree the filet was just so, so, so tender and slightly more tasty. Like all of us agreed, hands down, that was the best. But between the ribeye and the New York strip, I don't know if we had, I don't know which, I don't think one won out over the other. So all of that to say, all 3 of those cuts are fabulous for grilling: ribeye, New York strip, and filet. Now, one thing you do want to look for, like I said, there are other cuts you can use. You want to look for the marbling. The marbling matters. Not the gristle. You don't want to see a lot of gristle running through it, but the marbling. You can tell the difference because gristle is kind of almost bone looking or a little clear looking, whereas the fat that makes up the marbling is a white color. And that marbling is going to give your meat so much more flavor and juiciness because it's fat, guys. Something I used to fear way back when, but now I embrace it because it's the good fat. It's good for you. Our body needs it. There are so many vitamins our body cannot even process because they're fat soluble if we're not eating enough fat in our diet. So don't fear the marbling. Embrace the marbling. Also, thickness. You want to go for thicker rather than thinner. And I really like this about all the meat that I've ordered from 99 Counties, which is what I was talking about my subscription I'm getting. They come thick cut. And I really, really like that. I think some people are a little intimidated by that because you think, well, will the meal get done? And when you first look at it, the piece of meat looks a little smaller because, the circumference of it, is that what you want to call it when it's not a circle? The edge of it, the size of it is smaller overall because it's so much thicker. But it just makes such a better, tastier, juicier piece of meat if it's thicker. You want to go for like 1.5 inches. over an inch. An inch is not going to be quite thick enough to get this amazing flavor that I'm tasting literally right now as we're talking about this. And also searing. The thicker ones just are going to sear better. You're going to get that crisper edge on the outside and the amazing juiciness on the inside. Okay, now here's the secret. If you listen to nothing else, I have 3 more tips, but here's the real secret sauce when it comes to putting steak on the grill. And this is actually 3. Is it 3 steps? Yeah, 3 steps instead of 4. First of all, sear it for why was I going to say 3? 2. Sear it for 2 minutes on each side. And literally, if you need to, set a timer. Like, do this, 2 minutes each side. And then have a cooler section in your grill. If you have a traditional grill that has the lid, when you lift it up, that has the, what do I want to call that? The grill that like is smaller and lifts up with the lid, that's going to be your cooler area. Or if you're using like charcoal grill, just put charcoals on one side and leave the other side without any. However it works for your grill, have an area that's cooler and move your meat to the cool side after 2 minutes on each side searing. And then you want to leave it for exactly 8 minutes on the other side and take it off. After you've temped it, we're going to talk about temping, but pretty much without fail, if it's about 1.5 inches thick, 8 minutes is going to be a sweet, sweet spot. You do, in my opinion, want it to be slightly like a medium rare because that really adds to the flavor. If it gets too cooked, that was one of my biggest problems for probably decades with grilling meat. Like I would see it as the easy way to make the dinner and I'd put the meat on and then I'd go in the kitchen and I'd cut up the fruit and put the salad together and I wouldn't even set a timer sometimes. And it was just silly of me. Like I saw it as so hands off and easy. I didn't have to think about it as much, but I really should have been setting a timer and paying close attention because if it gets too done, it's going to get dried out and it's going to lose a lot of the juices and the flavor. So try this 2 minutes searing on each side, move it to the cool side, and then 8 minutes and temp it. And it's probably going to be perfect. As far as temping, if you want it to be on the rare side, you want to temp around probably 135, 140. Personally, I go for 145. That's my sweet spot for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're going to want to let it sit for at least 5 minutes before you cut it. And that time sitting, even taking it off the grill and leaving it sit on a plate, it's going to cook more. And second of all, 145 is going to, like I said, leave more flavor in it and more juices. So if you want your meat well done, though, you want to go for 160 for beef. And as far as the thermometer, that's kind of really important too. It took me a long time to understand this. If you get the right thermometer, it's an instant read digital thermometer. So you literally stick it in and you know instantly in that spot of the meat exactly what the temperature is. I highly recommend a good thermometer. I mean, it makes a world of difference. If you'd like to know my specific one, I cannot think of the name of it, but I highly recommend it. If you want to go to soulyrested.com/resources and then click on kitchen tools, I link my meat thermometer there. So SOULY rested.com/resources, kitchen tools. Now for your pork and your chicken, there's a lot of different cuts, just like with beef, that you can grill. But my personal favorite with pork is to grill a pork chop. And my personal favorite with chicken, if I have it, I'll be honest, I usually have breasts. But if I have it, I do think thighs grill better. They're more forgiving. Chicken can very easily get dried out, but a thigh, because of the bone and because it's dark meat, is going to stay juicier. So that's just my 2 thoughts on that. Before I go on to the other 3 tips about grilling meat, I'm going to stop and we're going to talk about burgers because, especially on Memorial Day, I know that's like probably the most common thing that we grill, right? Is our burgers on the grill. So the first thing you want to do, just like with any other meat, you want to start with the right ground beef. And again, you want to have the fat in there. So if it's a lean beef, it might be hard to get a juicy, wonderful, I can't talk, wonderful burger. So ideally, you want to go for like an 80-20 fat content and keep the beef cold until you're ready to make the patties. Don't make the mistake of letting it sit out on the counter because you have the company coming and you're doing other things, and then go to make the patties when it's room temperature because it's going to stick to your hands. It's going to be hard to make the patties. They're not going to form well. So take the meat right out of the refrigerator and then make your patties, and make them a little larger than your bun size because they are absolutely going to shrink, right? Because that fat content's going to shrivel up. And I also flatten them. I know some people don't do that, and I don't understand, because if you leave it rounded, kind of, you're going to have this roly-poly ball of burger to put on a bun when you're done. So I always get them flattened down as I'm forming the buns. And then I put them back in the refrigerator. I chill them again until it's time to put them on the grill, unless you're going to go right out. You can go ahead and form your patties and take them right to the grill. But if you're not putting them right on the grill, definitely sit them back in the fridge, because that's going to help them hold their shape and stay together when it's time to put them on the grill. They also kind of develop a nicer crust on the outside if they've cooled, I feel like. And you want your grill hot. You want to get them grilled quickly, but there's a sweet spot, because if you get it too hot, then obviously it's going to get burnt on the outside and be raw on the inside. So there is a sweet spot. They say around 400 degrees. I don't have a thermometer on my grill. We used to have a fancy one, but our grill isn't so fancy now. So I just kind of put it on the medium high. But and also you definitely want a clean grill. Always clean it off with one of those grill brushes, because otherwise your hamburger can very easily stick, and then the hamburger falls apart when you go to flip it over. And I recommend usually flipping them only once if you can. I know sometimes you really got to reflip them, but if you flip them once, you're going to lose less juices, and I find it leads to a juicier burger. And whatever you do, don't tell Bill. Bill never listens to this, but so he won't know because he never listens to my podcast. But he does it wrong. He insists on pressing down on the burgers. I think it's because he doesn't like them fat and he wants them nice and thin, like, smashed burgers. But he's pushing all the juices, all the wonderful flavored fat and juice of the meat down into the flames. And of course, then the flames come up and then the burgers get too done. So don't press the patties down with your spatula. Keep those juices in your burger to keep them extra delicious. I want to pause for a second and ask you, have you thought about how this one thing that you probably use a good bit of is going to be impacted by tariffs? Have you thought about the tea that you drink? It turns out I was talking just recently to someone who works in the industry, and he told me that very morning, the price of tea from China to distributors here in the US had risen by 247%. Now, the company he works for actually had a nice amount of supply on hand, so it wasn't going to impact their prices immediately. But he guaranteed me their prices would have to double or triple before they started running out of their current supply. So if you can find tea at a good price, it is absolutely the time to stock up. Tea will store for years if you keep it in a cool, dark place. And I've done that myself. It still tastes wonderful. But I wouldn't buy just any tea. I highly recommend our sponsor today. If you want to go to soulyrested.com/teas, TEAS. I share with you all of my favorite flavors and options that they have that are all organic, very high quality teas, but at an unbelievably good price, at least for now, before the tariffs hit them hard. So go stock up and use my code to save as you stock up. You can even stack my code on the bulk prices that they offer, which I highly recommend. Also at soulyrested.com/teas, I share with you some of my all-time favorite blends that I make myself, and I link to the teas that I use to make my blends. One of them is my family's all-time favorite replacement for Lipton tea. Zero bleached tea bags and zero pesticides on the leaves, but it tastes as good or better than the Lipton that my family would always drink before I started making this blend. That recipe, a lot of other ones, you'll find it all, and my code to save while you stock up. Go to soulyrested.com/teas, Teas. One of our sponsors today that I want to talk to you about for a second is a canning jar company. If you know me, you know I am not big into canning. I will do it, but it is definitely not my favorite means to preserve food, and I kind of dread it. But these are canning jars I can get behind 100%. It turns out I love to use them for storing food and as a drinking glass. You can see if you're on YouTube that I have a 1.5 pint size jar, which is perfect for a glass that I have my ice water in right now. But here's the thing, if I did can, I'd be using the jars from Azure Standard because they are made better. They simply are. I have read numerous sources in different Facebook canning groups how they're superior to other jars. They're actually thermal shock tested. They're better than anything else you're going to find on the market. And I love that they're thoughtfully designed and the logo is etched inward so you can put a label across your canning jar without any problem. And it's made of thick glass, so there's a less chance of breaking. Plus, they're this really pretty light blue, kind of robin's egg blue color. So check them out. Go to soulyrested.com/Azure, Azure, for lots more information about this amazing food supply company and their canning jars. But back to our talk about grilling burgers. If you want to add cheese, which I feel funny saying if, because I don't know. I have some questions for folks who don't want cheese on their burgers. But I digress. We are very much a cheese loving family. If you want to add cheese to your burgers, do that, of course, at the end and move your burger from the hot area to the cold area of your grill, just like we did when we talked about our ribeye steaks. And then lay the cheese on top and it will melt beautifully in just a minute or two. And also, if you like toasted buns, I mean, I'm a huge fan of toasting the bun because then the juices from the meat don't make your bun soggy. And I just like that little bit of crunch. So if you want to toast your bun, it's super easy. Just lay it on the cool part of the grill, maybe 3-4 minutes before the burgers are done. Or if you're really in a rush, you can also put your buns on the hot part of the grill for just, 40 seconds or something. So, is there anything else about? I guess just I could tell you if you want to use a thermometer. I don't do that for hamburgers. I don't know. I just go by look and how long they've been on there. But if you want to use a thermometer for your hamburgers, you want it probably around 160. You do want your ground meat done typically more than your thick steaks as far as temperature goes. Okay, so that's it for the hamburgers. Let's get back to our last 3 of 4 tips for grilling your meat this summer. The second tip is to master the salt and the seasoning. The salt is the really, really big thing in my mind. Something I did not know about until just rather recently, the last year or two. Salting your meat does amazing things. I think it's just fish that you would not salt. We don't eat fish. I've never been a fan of fish. I don't know. My parents loved fish, but I always passed it by when it was the dinner of choice for the evening. So we don't eat that. But I think that I'm pretty sure that's the only meat you wouldn't get a better flavor by salting it before you grill it. But lots of things to tell you about salting your meat. You want to salt it at least, well, bare minimum, 45 minutes before you're going to put your meat on the grill. But I was going to say at least 2 hours. That's my special magic number. I tend to, many times I have not had steak for dinner because I forgot to salt it 2 hours or less before dinner. So in other words, we want to eat in the next hour and 15 minutes. Then I'm like, nope, I haven't salted the steak yet. We're going to have something else for dinner. Put the steak back in the fridge until tomorrow. So that's how much I am a huge fan of a 2-hour window for salting. The salt, why salt? It literally breaks down the toughness of the muscle of the meat. It breaks down those muscle fibers, and it gives you, as a result, such a tender texture to your meat. And it also draws out, it's really cool to see it happen, draws out the moisture. And the moisture will literally sit on the surface of your steak. You can see that about 20 or 30 minutes after you've salted it. And then come back another half an hour, hour later, the moisture has started to be reabsorbed by the meat. And then the meat is going to just be juicier and have more juice that it retains throughout the cooking on the grill. So, how much salt? Honestly, knowing that I wanted to record this, I did a little test. I simply always liberally covered it with salt. But I decided I would actually measure the amount for you. So I could just tell you, use this much per pound. And I did some research and I thought, ooh, that's not enough. I think I put more salt than that. But I was shocked when I did the amount that my research told me. It was almost exactly what I would have done just by eyeballing it. So the numbers are, you want about 1.5 teaspoons of salt for every pound of meat. And I do need to specify what kind of salt. I should have told you that right up front. I always use kosher salt. If you're not familiar with kosher salt, it has nothing to do with being blessed by a rabbi. Kosher simply refers to the size of the granule, and it is the coarsest granule you can buy, except for the ones that are extremely coarse that you put in a grinder before you use it, and flake salt. Flake salt's much bigger and kind of a flat salt, like big flat chunks. So the kosher salt is 2 below that. So the biggest is flake, the next is coarse, which you have to have a grinder to use, and then the next one is kosher. So kosher is the largest grind of salt you can use without a grinder. And the reason that is the only one that I will use to salt my steak is because it's going to evenly distribute itself very nicely. If you use a typical kind of table salt, you can, but you're probably going to wind up with some pockets of salty meat because it's harder to evenly distribute it. When you're shaking on that finer salt, you're going to have more globs of it in some places. So coarse is just really, really good for this purpose. And if you want to use like the actual coarse salt or a flake salt, it's going to be too big and you're going to have other problems. So kosher salt is the best. Now, on top of that, I got to tell you, I only use one kind of salt. I have for, I bet you it's been probably 8 years or longer now that I have not purchased any other salt, because Redmond real salt is directly out of the mines in Utah. There's no pollution, yet it is loaded with minerals because they don't take any minerals out to sell them off to animal feed companies and other food companies. They leave all the minerals in there that naturally occur in the salt. So it's pollution free and it has 60 trace minerals in every portion of salt. I love it. You're adding minerals just by flavoring your food. And their kosher salt is fantastic. I just ordered a 10-pound bag because I use a lot of it and love it. And I just keep it in a bucket. So Redmond real salt kosher salt is what I use for all of my meat that I'm going to be grilling or even broiling inside in the oven. So I told you the kind of grind, I told you how much, and I told you how early. But you can put the salt on up to 24 hours ahead of time. If you go too far ahead, you can actually make your meat tougher. But 2 hours, I think, is a very sweet spot. I will leave it at room temperature for maybe half an hour even up to an hour to let that salt really, dissolve and pull out the moisture. But then I will stick it in the fridge, if that makes sense. If it's a really hot day, of course, I won't leave it for that long. And I will put a piece of saran wrap over it, maybe 45 minutes to an hour into the process, because otherwise I feel like it might dry out a little bit if it's sitting there for a couple hours uncovered. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if that's a scientific thing to do, but um, what else? Is there anything else about salt? I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to forget to tell you the important things about the salt. I think that's everything I had to tell you. Um, you there's lots of other ways, of course, to flavor your salt. Oh, I know. I also add garlic salt and onion salt, and I usually will add those just right before I put it on the grill. So I'll do the thick layer of kosher salt for 2 hours. And right before grilling, I'll add a nice thin layer coating all over of onion salt and garlic salt. Makes for such good steak or chicken or pork chops. Dry rubs are great if you want to get kind of a crusty bark on your food. And then marinades are also great if you have a piece of meat that really needs a little bit more tenderization. Like a flank steak is a very lean cut, and it's good. It's like the poor man's ribeye, but it is much leaner. So for that, I would typically actually marinate it for a few hours before cooking. And that's going to give it a more tenderness and more of a bold kind of flavor. But avoid any sugary marinades or sugary dry rubs because that's going to probably burn on your grill. If you're doing it inside in the broiler, then that's totally great. But out on the grill, it's probably going to burn. Um, and as far as if you want to just make, I will share mine in the show notes. But if you want to make your own marinades, you just want to cover all the bases. You want to have an acid. So that would typically be either some sort of citrus or a vinegar base. And you want a fat, so some sort of an oil, and you want something to give it the flavor or the aromatics, so like garlic and herbs, and then you want the salt. Now, here's the big problem most people have when they're making their dry rubs. They just include the salt with it. They put it on right before they stick it on the grill and they go for it, which don't get me wrong, it's still going to be a decent piece of meat, but they're avoiding that whole thing we just talked about with the salt that's going to tenderize and give more juice to your steak. So I don't put my salt in my dry rubs. I'll do that separately and then add the dry rub with the other three factors, with the acid and the fat and the extra flavors. Hope that makes sense. And another tip is to pat your meat dry before you put it on the grill. If you kind of just use paper towels and pat it a little bit, because those drawn out juices that might still be laying there from your dry rub that you put on it or from your salt, they can actually make it a challenge to sear your meat. Because remember, with our steak, we talked about putting it on 2 minutes on each side on the hot part of the grill, right? Because we're searing it. That brings out the flavor and it gets the outside just gorgeous looking. But the surface has to reach 212 degrees to actually sear it and to create the extra flavor. And that's more of a challenge, especially in that 2 minute window that you want that done, if there's juices there that the grill has to evaporate off first. So all of that to say, just pat your meat dry if it looks a little wet before you're putting it on the grill. All right, our third point is to control your heat and to control the zones. We've already talked about the zones, to have the hot zone and the cold zone, but that kind of goes along with controlling the heat. Good thermometer, have a grill that allows you to have a cooler area where you can move the meat over. Avoid the flare ups, so don't squish down your hamburgers. And if you have a really, really fatty piece of meat, just be watching closer that it doesn't flare up and cause those huge flames that then burn your meat. And don't overcrowd the grill. Always leave room. We do have a challenge because we downsized on our grill and then a few adult kids moved home for a while. So our grill is really not big enough. I am not walking the walk as I say this. I'm talking the talk, but I'm not walking the walk for now. But I will tell you, you don't want to overcrowd your grill. It's nice to leave room so that you can move the meat around. When you see that some meat's getting more done and some isn't done enough, you can move it to the hot spot versus the cold spot and get it moved around. So ideally have a larger grill than the size you need for what you're typically cooking. And the fourth point, this is the hardest one, guys. It really is. You got to let it rest. Nobody likes this part. Nobody. But it really makes a difference if you let your meat rest for at least 5 minutes. 10 is more ideal. I'll be honest with you, I almost never do that unless my veggies aren't ready and I'm busy in the kitchen because I want to eat that steak because it looks and tastes and smells so good. For at least 5 minutes, hold yourself back and you will be glad that you did because it's going to lead to a juicier, tastier piece of meat if you don't cut into it right away, because those juices that are in there, once you cut into it, they're just going to ooze out and onto the plate. You want them to be moving around inside the meat and flavoring the meat a little bit longer before you cut into it. Also, super important, I think we all know this, but it's definitely worth saying. You want to slice against the grain. Think about it as these tough muscles that are in this meat that, was in this cow that was walking around in the fields and building up his muscles. And there's these strands of muscle that are all going a certain direction, let's say right to left. If you slice into the meat right to left, you're just going to be slicing like in between those muscles. And when you go to take a bite, it's going to be all that muscle and your teeth are going to have trouble getting through that tough muscle. But let's go back and picture it again. If the muscles are running right to left and you cut it top to bottom, right? Instead of right to left, top to bottom, you're breaking that muscle, you're weakening it. And then when you go to take a bite, it's all of the meat, not just that tough piece of muscle. So I don't know if that helped anybody, but when somebody explained that to me long ago, it was like a light bulb and I understood. Oh, that's why it matters. Because I always knew people said it, but I didn't know it actually mattered. It does. Slice against the grain of the meat. You're going to have the most tender, wonderful meat if you do that. It's especially important if you're having something like a skirt steak or a flank steak or anything that's a really lean piece of meat. I'm sorry, or that's a tougher piece of meat naturally is what I'm trying to say. And then the final little tip I'd give you goes back to salt. We were talking about what flake salt is. Flake salt is so wonderful. It gives just the appearance of it on top of your food. I like putting it on chocolate chip cookies even. It just makes you feel pampered. But on top of that, when you crunch into it with one of your bites of steak and you get this little burst of salt. I mean, I really like the flavor of salt on things. So if you're not huge into salt, maybe you wouldn't agree with me. But when your steak's all done, after it has sat there for 5 minutes, by the way, this all goes for all the meat. I don't know why I just keep talking about steak. I think I'm really hungry for steak. We're having steak for dinner tonight, so I'm sure that's why I have steak on the brain. It's some delicious looking ribeyes from 99 Counties. Oh my word. Now I'm really hungry the more I think about it. Anyway, once it is done cooking, let it sit there for at least 5 minutes on the plate and then sprinkle a little bit of flake salt on top and present it for the dinner table. Guys, that's like an act of love. That last little thing of just sprinkling on a little flake salt. So good. Unfortunately, Redmond does not make flake salt. I've actually asked them more than once, are you going to? Do you? And I've never actually asked why. That'll be my next question. I need to ask them that. If I find out, I'll let you guys know. Because I think flake salt is just such a great final little step to so many things. And I love Redmond real salt. So the fact that I have to buy my flake salt from some other company makes me sad. So if they ever make flake salt, I'm pretty sure I will be letting you know. I might be on top of the roof yelling it to my neighbors too, because that would make me really happy. But all that is beside the point. So I think that was my final tip. Well, okay, I'm going to throw one more tip in. Have a good knife. This might sound silly, but for years, and I think it's because I had little kids, didn't want them to get hurt, didn't want any chance of a really sharp knife around. I just kind of got used to using dull knives, bad knives, old knives. Get a good knife, guys. Oh my word, it makes such a difference just to slide it right through across the grain and slice that meat up. It shows respect for your meat, right? Like, get a good knife. That's my final tip. So that's it. I hope you are having or did have a fantastic Memorial Day weekend. And I hope you had time to just be thankful for the lives that were given in service to this nation. It's a good nation, and so many lives have made this nation possible. So I'm thankful for that. Well, that is it for today. I hope you can join me on Friday. We have a fun One Simple Thing episode, 5 minutes or less every Friday. So join me for that. You're going to like it this week. And please sign up if you haven't already for me to send you a quick little email once a week to know about the episodes. If you go to soulyrested.com/podcast, then you can do that. And I will pop into your inbox with the links and information. And if you want to leave a review over on Apple Podcasts, I read everyone. It makes me super happy. Please find me on Apple Podcast and leave that 5-star review and let me know what you think of the show. So that's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Remember, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple, everyday efforts. It's not easy, but it's definitely a good life.